This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up, Dave Mathews and Craig Crawford of Texas Gulf Energy, veterans in the oilfield services space discussing its incredible growth. Next up, Scott Souls, PKF Texas, discussing culture, corruption, and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the international energy space. All that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. We have with us today the President and Vice President of Texas Gulf Energy, Mr. Dave Mathews and Mr. Craig Crawford. Gentlemen, great to have you on the program.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for having us.
So tell us about Texas Gulf Energy.
Well, Texas Gulf Energy is primarily a construction, maintenance, and turnaround company. We also have a production component. We have properties out in West Texas, oil wells. We do drilling and well rehabilitation. But essentially, we're a construction company. We've been in the business a long time. We've collectively been doing this for 35 to 40 years, and we're excited about the opportunities in the industry.
And it's been an exciting time, right?
Yes,
I mean, with all the fracking revolution,
yes.
The services side of the energy business has been incredible.
Yes, it has, and we anticipate that it's going to get better. Looking at the upstream side, we see big opportunities in the exploration side, but we also see opportunities in what we call the midstream and the downstream sides, in the refineries, the chemical plants, and the process industry.
So how big is the company?
Our company currently, our guidance is showing 40 to 45 million revenue this year, with significant growth for the following years. And
you're working with all the majors?
Yes, all of the majors, the Exxon Mobil, Shells, ConocoPhillips, Invistas. Those are our core customers.
How do you differentiate yourself from your competition?
For us as a service company, we have the capability of providing services all the way from shop fabrication of vessels and pipe to field installation and maintenance of facilities. There are very few companies that are as fully vertically integrated as we are. In addition to that, we have a company, Fishbone Solutions, that is a planning, scheduling, project controls organization. We provide those services to the industry. We also use them to drive our business. Everything we do is planned, scheduled, organized, and executed according to the plan. That's not something you normally see in construction companies. Another differentiator is that all of our senior management team are former construction managers, project managers, engineering managers, project controls managers. We have a very flat organization, very little bureaucracy, and very project focused.
Craig, walk me through what a job looks like.
Well, a project for us is going to be focused on the process side of the oil and gas industry, refining, petrochemicals, where they need to rebuild, reconstruct, and improve the throughput so they can increase revenues out of their unit, right?
Right.
So they hire us to come in and apply our expertise to improving that unit. And that means rebuilding and rerunning piping, furnaces, boilers, access to feedstocks, pipelines. All of that is a part of what we provide them. And we wrap it in a package of project controls and project management that is born of our experiences 40 years ago, where by coincidence David and I both started off our careers with Brown and Root, which was one of the old Houston, Texas, Austin, Texas construction companies.
Sure.
And George Brown had a process that we all were educated under, and we believe that David has set a value for our company where we're applying a lot of those processes, updated for the new technologies and some of the new approaches to doing things. We keep people safer. We want high productivity, but we also reward our people and show them that they have a path for growth in the future. And that's part of what the value system that we've used in putting these companies together. And it makes a difference.
Well, and energy companies think ahead, right? So that's got to put a big burden on the companies servicing them. How do you handle that?
Well, you have to think ahead. Our business success depends entirely upon our ability to plan our business. Right. We have to plan for our company, but we also have to anticipate what our customers are doing and where they're headed. After 35 or 40 years in the business, I finally realized that this business is very cyclical.
Right.
It goes up and down. Those cycles are predictable. We've been in one of the troughs for the last 2 or 3 years. We're convinced that we're coming up on the upside again. We need to prepare for that. You can't wait until the upside hits and then go out and do the work. So what we've been doing over the past year is building the foundation, the systems, the people, the organization, the intelligence to be ready for that growth.
Well, in some innovative ways. Tell me about this program with the Philippines.
Well, there's currently a real worker shortage in our industry.
Right.
Skilled construction crafts are in short supply. If this trend continues with the increasing work, and the forecast work just in North America and particularly on the Gulf Coast is mega billions of work in the refineries and the chemical plants and the LNG facilities. There's more work forecast than there are people to do the work. So we're looking at every resource we can to find people to do that work. One of those resources, we have an alliance partner that's an international construction company that brings workers from the Philippines. We do that through a non-immigrant worker visa program. These are English-speaking, highly skilled, very experienced workers, and we have access to that resource, literally thousands of workers. We're also working with the ABC organizations, with returning veterans organizations, and attempting to identify as many workers as we can to get into these skilled trades. Something that's different this time in the upswing is that the shortage is not only in the U.S., but international markets. We're actually having inquiries from Australia about bringing American workers to Australia to meet their needs. They're forecasting as many as 35 to 40,000 worker shortages in Australia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Canada.
Throughout Asia.
Throughout Asia. And a really ironic and odd situation is actually in China and India. They have a skilled construction worker shortage. They don't have a worker shortage. They don't have a labor shortage, but skilled workers, they have a shortage.
Well, we've got an election right around the corner. How does that November affect your industry?
I think it's going to have a huge impact on our industry. Depending on which way it goes, we're going to see either increased regulation and taxation or hopefully decreased or stabilized taxation and regulation. Our industry is very sensitive to regulatory and tax issues. There's a lot of concern and angst in the industries right now because they don't know what's coming.
Sure.
And we have to predict and plan our businesses 2, 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So I think it's going to have a huge impact. I'm hopeful that it goes the right way for businesses' sake, and we see a huge expansion in our businesses. Currently, the regulatory environment is so restrictive, it's almost impossible to get a new plant, a new refinery approved to build. And a lot of the market conditions that drive those new investments aren't that long term. So they can't wait 8, 10, 12 years to make those investments. So we need some help on the regulatory side.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in today. I know our audience is going to be excited to hear some continued positive things about the energy industry.
Yeah, Paul, thank you for having us. We're excited about the opportunities as well.
Well, and that concludes our discussion with Dave and Craig. We'll be back with more right after this.
future is here.
You can't see it. It's electric.
At NRG, we're providing clean energy and now charging stations to make the electric car a reality. Kinda makes you want a boogie woogie, doesn't it? NRG, moving clean energy forward.
It's electric.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back. My guest now, Scott Soules, a director with PKF Texas. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So PKF Texas, what is that?
Well, it's a full-service CPA firm.
It is.
The way that I like to describe it to folks is think of some of the other major household name firms, and we resemble those firms. We're just smaller in scale, but we do have an international network.
And enjoy an incredible reputation.
Great reputation, good brand, good solid people, international. I mean, all the things you could think of you'd want.
Tell me about your role.
Well, I'm a director, as you already noted, and I get really involved in the energy side of the business. I'm involved with a lot of the garden variety business activities such as business growth.
Right.
So I help with that, but it's really energy centric and then non-audit, non-tax related client service type of services.
Well, I know you work a fair amount, not only on providing those services, but you've got a particular expertise when it comes to company culture. And I'd love to explore that.
Well, it's huge, you know, and not everybody gets it when it comes to culture, whether it's company or country or whatever, but I've had the good fortune of being involved with extensive international travel, working and traveling to a lot of foreign countries. And what I've seen is that it's probably the most interesting and underestimated factor in energy companies doing business around the world.
Well, and it directly ties in with risk.
It ties exactly in with risk. It's all about risk in energy anyway.
Sure.
So safety, environmental, capital risk, everything you can think of under the sun. So it's a huge factor in their success or failure.
When you're looking at companies expanding operations, say to the Middle East or to Asia or Latin America, what are some of the things that when it comes to that risk/culture? There's
a lot of things. You know, the first thing is now that's on the horizon for everybody that enters into a country is, am I going to be able to make any money here? You know, how does that country respond to investment coming in from the outside? What things am I at risk for from a nationalization exposure or Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or can I operate safely within the boundaries of that country? There's just a lot of issues there.
Well, and you hit on FCPA, that Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Right. You seem to be hearing more and more about that these days. Tell us more.
It's been around for a long, long time. It's all about I guess the perceived propensity of countries or governments within certain countries to be corrupt, take bribes, that type of thing. And our U.S. Department of Justice is actually in a constantly evolving stage also, you know. So they look at things a little bit differently. New things start to come into the foray in terms of what's a bribe, you know. So it's a big challenge for energy companies.
What is a bribe?
Well, really, that's changing too. But, you know, within the context of the FCPA, for example, you know, many activities now that were just things that were commonly performed within country walls without too much concern, like how you expedite getting your materials and supplies into the country, how you bring in people to the country and all the personnel issues.
Yeah.
And we used to call it line cutting. You know, some of those things, if you're paying somebody that's part of the government, any type of payment, you know, you've got to be looking at it very closely, make sure you have your ducks in a row in terms of what is that and how is that managed.
Well, when it comes to foreign corrupt practices and what American companies are prohibited from doing versus their in-country competition, help our viewers understand some of the challenges faced by American companies competing for in-country contracts.
Yeah, that's a real powder keg. I mean, obviously, that creates unfair competition. I mean, over the long term, in theory, the idea is that as the globe continues to squeeze on corruption, that you're going to have a better economy and you're going to have better societies, and children within those countries won't be raised in corrupt environments and things like that. But it does create unfair competition, and so there's challenges there. But with international standards and international agreements that we use, we're trying to overcome some of those barriers.
What other advice do you have when it comes to culture in the energy space?
There's kind of a industry-country clash that I see all the time that's just inherent, for example, in the safety space. You know, you go to an energy company today that's a good energy company, they're so safety conscious.
Sure.
And we've been around the evolution of this for a long, long time. But, you know, you can't even start a meeting without having a safety moment. You take in a country where people would rather sell their safety boots than wear them, and you take an industry or a company like that and you put them together, it just takes a while for them to all get on the same page. Those are challenges that they face every day.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome.
And that wraps this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.